Truistory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. The sun had barely risen over the sleepy town of Halebrook, casting golden light through the cracked blinds of a modest two-bedroom apartment. Inside, Amara Levine stood barefoot in the kitchen, the cold tiles chilling her soles. She held a chipped mug of black coffee untouched. Her fingers trembled slightly, though not from the temperature. Today was the day everything would change. At 26, Amara had the dreams of someone younger and the burdens of someone far older. A scholarship to study architecture in New York had once seemed like her ticket out, a golden path paved with hope. But that path had crumbled the moment her mother collapsed 3 years ago, diagnosed with an aggressive neurological condition. Within weeks, Amara packed her bags. Not for Manhattan, but to come back home. And then there was Jacob. He had never asked her to stay. But he didn't need to. Jacob Morrow had a smile that could warm a blizzard and a touch that made the world seem less cruel. He was 5 years older, already working at the local mechanic shop, always with grease on his hands and humor in his eyes. They had dated in high school, that typical slow-burn romance that started with helping her fix a flat tire and ended in kisses by the riverbank. When she came home, he was there, supportive, reliable, comforting. And when her mother passed last spring, leaving her alone in the world, it was Jacob who wrapped his arms around her in the hallway outside the ICU and whispered, "You don't have to go through this alone anymore." So, when he proposed 6 months later, under a rain-speckled streetlight, ring in hand, voice shaking, she said yes. It wasn't until a week before the wedding that the doubts arrived. They didn't storm in like a dramatic monsoon. They crept like fog under a doorframe, subtle, slow, cold. It started with an old email. NYU's graduate program coordinator had followed up, unaware she'd deferred 3 years ago. "We'd love to have you reapply. The department remembers your work fondly." She had stared at the message for over an hour before deleting it. But the seed was planted. That same night, Jacob had come home with a surprise. "Look what I found," he grinned, tossing a brochure on the kitchen table. A fixer-upper property just outside town.
cheap, rundown.
Full of potential. "We can build a life here.
Literally.
You design it. I'll fix it." Amara had forced a smile. She hadn't told him about the email, or the dreams she still carried in the dusty corners of her heart. Because Jacob was kind and loyal, and he loved her in a way that demanded nothing, and yet quietly expected everything. The day of the wedding came like an avalanche. White flowers, nervous relatives, vows written on cream stationery, and a girl in a dressing room staring at herself in a mirror, not seeing a bride, but a prisoner in a gown. Her best friend, Talia, knocked gently and entered. "You look like you're about to pass out." Amara laughed, too loudly. Talia knelt beside her, smoothing out the lace at the hem. "You don't have to do this, you know." "Yes, I do."
Why?
Amara opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say? That she was scared of being alone? That she owed Jacob for all he'd done? That building someone else's dream felt easier than chasing her own? Instead, she said, "Because I love him."
And she did, in a way.
The ceremony was beautiful, simple, rustic. The kind of wedding Pinterest boards were made for. Jacob cried as he said his vows. She held his hands tightly and smiled through the ache in her chest. That night, lying beside him in their rented cabin, Jacob traced shapes on her bare shoulder and whispered, "We'll make this work, no matter what." Amara stared at the ceiling fan spinning in lazy circles. "Of course we will," she said. But something inside her, something fragile and unspoken, cracked just a little more. The first few months of marriage were peaceful, routine. Jacob fixed cars by day and came home covered in oil and stories. Amara worked remotely for a design firm, drafting floor plans for clients she'd never meet. Her talent was evident. Her passion, less so. Jacob talked endlessly about their future home. He brought home paint samples, lumber brochures, watched YouTube tutorials on plumbing. Amara nodded, smiled, cooked dinner. But at night, she'd open old notebooks, sketching modern lofts and city skylines by the light of her phone. Her dreams never stopped calling. They just grew quieter beneath the noise of real life. One morning, Jacob noticed a design she left open on the kitchen table. "This is incredible," he said. "Why don't you submit it somewhere?" She hesitated. "It's not finished." "It's amazing, Mara. Really. You're wasting your gift sitting here drawing garages for soccer moms." He meant it as a compliment, but it hit like an accusation. That night, she sat by the window with a glass of wine and a heart full of static. The life she had, it wasn't unhappy, but it wasn't hers. And guilt, that constant companion, whispered, "You chose this. You gave up the dream. You said yes." She thought about New York, about the studio apartment she never moved into, the skyline she never saw outside her window, the version of herself that still lived somewhere in that parallel life. One Friday evening, Jacob came home early, a strange tension in his shoulders. "You okay?" she asked. He hesitated. "Saw someone today. A guy named Aaron. Said he used to know you." Her stomach tightened. Aaron Thorne, her college friend. More than that, once. Before Jacob. Before everything.
Oh,
She said carefully.
yeah.
"He was in my design cohort. Said he's working in Chicago now. Own firm. Big stuff." He asked why you never reapplied to NYU. Amara looked away. Jacob was quiet. Then, softly, "Did you want to?" She took a long breath. "I used to." He nodded, slowly. "Did you ever regret staying?" There it was. The question she'd avoided for 3 years. The truth curled inside her like smoke in her lungs. "Yes," she whispered.
He didn't speak.
Didn't move. Just stared at her like she'd slapped him with words. "I don't regret you," she added quickly. "I just regret who I stopped being." That night, Jacob slept on the couch, and Amara lay awake, feeling the walls of their tiny home close in just a little tighter. The next morning, the silence between them was deafening. Jacob packed his things quietly and left for work without a word.
Nookies.
"No, I love you." Amara sat at the table, staring at a blank page on her sketchpad. She began to draw. Not houses. Not garages. A museum. In the city. Steel arches. Glass panels that caught the sunrise. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Iris had always believed that silence was strength, that by keeping her pain locked behind a calm smile, she was protecting her dignity. But silence, she would come to realize, could also be a prison. It started with a phone call Thorne left unattended on the kitchen counter. He never used to do that. While preparing dinner, Iris heard it buzz once, then again. A name she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. Rhea. The text preview beneath it said only, "She misses you, Daddy." Iris froze. For a moment, the world narrowed. The boiling pot hissed in the background. Rain tapped against the window pane. But all she could hear was the rush of her own blood, pounding in her ears. She didn't open the message. She didn't touch the phone. She didn't even breathe. That night, Thorne returned from his meeting and kissed her forehead like nothing had changed. Iris returned the gesture, just as she always did, but her mind was elsewhere. Over the next week, the messages kept coming. Rhea. Again and again. Once, Iris found a drawing tucked between Thorne's suit jackets while doing laundry, a child's drawing. A stick figure family. One man, one woman, and a little girl with curly hair. Labeled beneath in shaky handwriting, "Mommy, Daddy, me." Iris didn't confront him. Not yet. She needed clarity. Proof. Something she couldn't unsee or unhear. It came 2 Sundays later. She followed him, not in a way that felt real to her, but more like a ghost trailing the living. He left home early, claiming a last-minute business brunch. Iris waited 10 minutes before quietly grabbing her coat and keys. He drove across the city to a quiet suburb in Astoria Hills, parked in front of a modest white townhouse, knocked on the door without hesitation. When it opened, a woman stepped out, tall, honey blonde hair, striking features. Rhea. She kissed him, not on the cheek, not like a friend. Iris watched as he scooped up a little girl from the doorway, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck like they belonged there. She giggled, called him daddy. It was a punch to the lungs. She drove home in a fog, her fingers trembling on the wheel, her breath shallow. And when Thorne returned that evening, with a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, she took them, smiled, cooked his dinner, and said nothing. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the scale of the lie. Thorne had another life, another family, a child who looked to him with trust Iris had once reserved solely for their future together. She didn't sleep that night, or the night after, or the one after that. She wanted to scream, to confront him, to rage, to shatter plates, to tear open the neat order of their lives. But instead, she stared at the ceiling and counted the cracks. When the hurt didn't dull, she did what she hadn't done in years. She turned to Thorne's mother. Margot had always been cold, measured, a woman with tight-lipped smiles and even tighter expectations. But Iris was desperate. "Did you know?" she asked one afternoon in the garden. Her voice didn't tremble, but her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. Margot didn't blink. "About the girl?" The air turned to ice. Iris nodded slowly. "And Rhea?" Margot clipped a dead bloom from a rose bush. "She's not the first woman to forgive a man for his distractions." That was it.
No denial. No apology.
Just an elegant wave of the pruning shears and a comment as casual as the breeze. Iris felt something snap inside her. A thin thread she didn't even know she'd been clinging to. Margot sipped her tea. "If you want this family, Iris, you must learn to endure quietly. Men falter. Wives endure. That's the way it's always been." Iris stood. Her hands were cold, but her face was burning. That night, she didn't set a place for Thorne at the dinner table. When he asked, she simply said, "I already ate." She said little after that. No more morning kisses. No more goodnight touches. She existed beside him, not with him. Weeks turned into months. The weight of the secret became her constant companion, one she carried through daily routines, through moments with their daughter, Alara, who was too young to understand the storm brewing in her mother's silence. One evening, Iris found herself staring at an old wedding photo tucked in the back of their closet. She looked young, radiant, hopeful. She barely recognized herself. Thorne came home late that night, smelled like perfume that didn't belong to her. Iris said nothing. She just looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who had once vowed forever, now buried beneath deception and cowardice. "Is there something you want to say to me?" she asked quietly. Thorne blinked. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just wondering if you still know who I am." He laughed awkwardly. "You're tired. Come to bed." But Iris didn't sleep in their bed that night. She lay on the couch, holding Alara's baby blanket, inhaling the faint scent of innocence, and wondering how something so beautiful had grown from something so false. It was around this time Iris began journaling again. Pages filled with questions she couldn't ask aloud. Emotions too tangled to sort through. Why wasn't I enough? When did he stop loving me? How long had they been laughing behind my back? How do I look my daughter in the eyes and pretend everything is okay? Writing became her therapy, her rebellion, her truth. She began to detach, not out of weakness, but survival. She started doing small things for herself, changing the way she dressed, waking up early to walk alone in the park, drinking her coffee slowly instead of rushing to refill his mug. She even changed her perfume. Thorne noticed. "You're different," he said one morning as she tied her hair up. "Is everything all right?" Iris met his gaze in the mirror. "Everything's just beginning." He smiled, not understanding. Then came Alara's preschool play. Iris arrived early to save seats. She spotted Rhea 2 rows ahead, holding the hand of her daughter, the same little girl from the townhouse. She looked back at Iris with brief recognition. No guilt, no fear, just a quiet acknowledgement. I exist. And I'm not going anywhere. Thorne arrived late, sat beside Iris, leaned in to whisper how sorry he was for missing dinner.
She didn't respond.
Her eyes were locked on the child standing center stage, the one they both called Daddy. Iris clapped when Alara took her bow, but her hands felt numb. Later that night, after putting Alara to sleep, she turned to Thorne. How long?
He knew what she meant.
His lips parted, then closed. He sat down slowly, like his legs couldn't support the weight of the truth anymore.
2 years, he said.
Iris nodded. Does she know about me? She knew I was married, but I told her we were unhappy, that we were distant. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Iris laughed, a sound like broken glass. You didn't mean to have a child? I didn't plan it. She looked at him for a long time. But you kept going back. Silence. I loved you, Iris. I still do. No, she said softly. You loved the version of me who didn't question, who waited up, who believed your lies. He opened his mouth to protest, but she raised her hand. I'm not ready to leave, she said. Not yet. Alara deserves stability, but I need space. He nodded, helpless. Iris stood. You may have betrayed me, Thorne, but I will not betray myself any longer. That night, she moved into the guest room. And that was how the silence between them changed, from one of ignorance to one of quiet war. Winter came early that year. The first frost crept in through the windows of Iris's world before the season officially arrived. She felt it in her chest, in the spaces where warmth once lived, now filled with an aching, quiet cold. The days passed in stillness. Not silence. Alara's laughter still echoed through the house, but a stillness Iris couldn't shake. Like her life had been placed under glass. The guest room became her haven, her prison, her reminder. Each morning, she rose before the sun to prepare breakfast. She dressed Alara for preschool, braided her hair, packed her lunch with handwritten notes. She smiled. She always smiled. But the moment the door closed behind her daughter, Iris unraveled. She curled on the couch with a book she couldn't focus on. She scrubbed floors that were already clean. She wandered through the house as if it were a museum of a life she no longer recognized. Thorne still lived there, of course, but in the shadows. They passed each other like ghosts in the hallway, polite, distant, unbearably civil. Some nights he tried to talk, tried to apologize. Iris never raised her voice. She didn't cry. Her punishment wasn't anger. It was absence. That was worse. One evening, as sleet tapped at the windows like impatient fingers, Iris sat beside the fireplace with a mug of untouched tea. Alara lay asleep upstairs. Thorne stood in the doorway, hesitant. Iris, he said quietly, this isn't a way to live. She didn't look at him. No, it isn't. I want to fix it. You can't. He stepped closer. I'll end it. With Rhea. I'll focus on us again. Please. Iris turned toward him, her voice steady. You had a child with her. He flinched. You didn't just betray me. You built a new life while expecting me to maintain the old one. You don't get to erase that because it's inconvenient now. He stood in silence. Go to bed, Thorne. And he did. In the weeks that followed, Iris retreated into routine.
Work.
Alara.
Chores. Repeat.
The pain didn't vanish, but it settled, like sediment in a glass of water. Still present, but less clouding. And yet, sometimes, when the light hit just wrong, everything stirred again. On Alara's 5th birthday, Iris baked a cake from scratch. She invited friends, decorated the living room with pink balloons and glittery streamers. She even let Thorne help hang a unicorn banner. For Alara's sake. The party was cheerful. No one noticed how Iris didn't eat, or how her eyes glazed over when Rhea's name was mentioned in a conversation between parents. That night, When Alara fell asleep with frosting on her cheeks, Iris stared at her daughter's peaceful face and whispered, "You're the only reason I stayed." Loneliness wasn't just silence. It was folding laundry without help. It was attending parent meetings solo, while Thorne missed them for client dinners. It was checking Alara's temperature alone at 3 a.m., praying it wasn't the flu, with no one to hold her hand and say, "We've got this." It was waiting every single day for the ache to go away. Iris started journaling again. But now, her words shifted. Less about betrayal. More about survival. More about rediscovery. Who am I without him? What have I buried beneath years of compromise? What do I want, not need, but truly want? In January, snow blanketed Astoria Hills in quiet white. Iris stood by the window, watching children build snowmen. Alara pressed her face to the glass, giggling. "I want to play too." Iris dressed her warmly, zipped her coat, and led her outside. Laughter. Snow angels. A crooked snow bear with mismatched button eyes. Iris forgot the cold, forgot the pain. For 2 perfect hours. She remembered who she was before heartbreak, just a mother. A woman who loved deeply. A soul rediscovering joy, one snowflake at a time. That night, Iris opened her laptop. For the first time in years, she updated her resume. She applied for a part-time editorial assistant position at a small publishing house downtown. The interview was in a brick building with creaky floors and the scent of coffee and old pages. The manager, Lena, smiled over a stack of manuscripts. "Your background's impressive. But you've been out of the field for a while?" Iris smiled back, unfazed. "I've been raising a child, managing a home, recovering. That's not a gap. That's growth." Lena nodded. "Fair enough. You're hired." Work became therapy. Iris would walk into the office each morning, shake off her ghosts, and lose herself in stories. Manuscripts. Proofreading. Formatting. A world of words that didn't lie to her. That gave her control. She began dressing differently. Sleek blazers. Bold lipstick. Her colleagues noticed. Lena teased. Someone's got their fire back. At night, she returned to the quiet house with sore feet, but a full heart. Alara would run to greet her. Sometimes Thorne would watch from the hallway, silent. He saw the change, but didn't know what to do with it. One night, he tried. "You look incredible," he said. Iris blinked, polite. "Thank you." He took a step closer. "Dinner this weekend? Just us? Maybe we can." She cut him off gently. "I don't want to go backward." He nodded, hurt, but said nothing more. Alara had questions sometimes. "Why don't you sleep in the same room as Daddy?" Iris smiled gently. "Sometimes grown-ups need space to think clearly." "Will you get back together?" "I don't know, sweetie. But whatever happens, you'll always have both of us." And that was true. Spring approached, but inside, it still felt like winter. Iris didn't rush the thaw. She embraced the cold. Let it teach her. She learned how to cook for one, without sadness. How to enjoy her own company. How to set boundaries, with Thorne, with Margot, with herself. Margot, for her part, remained distant. But occasionally she would comment, "Iris, you look different these days." I assume you're still punishing Thorne."
"No," Iris replied.
"I'm just not rewarding betrayal." April brought rain. Renewal. Lena promoted Iris to a full-time role. She even asked if she wanted to edit a new up-and-coming author's debut novel. "I think you'll relate to the main character," Lena said with a wink. Iris laughed. "Does she burn everything down?" "Not yet. But she learns how to rise." Iris accepted. One afternoon, while reorganizing the attic, Iris found an old box. Inside, her college thesis, photos of her childhood dog, an unopened letter from her father, dated a year before he passed. She read it, hands shaking. "Iris, I know life won't always be fair. People will hurt you. But don't let them turn you into someone you're not. Stay kind. Stay curious. Stay brave. Love, Dad." She wept, and when she finished, She felt something loosen in her chest. A knot she hadn't known she'd been carrying. By the time summer peeked through the clouds, Iris no longer felt like a woman shattered. She felt like a woman sculpted, reshaped by pain, but never destroyed. She took Alara on a weekend trip to the coast.
Just the two of them.
Beach walks, seashell hunts, melted ice cream. They laughed more in those 3 days than they had in months. On the final night, as they watched the sunset, Alara leaned her head against Iris's shoulder. "You're the best, Mommy." Iris smiled, eyes glistening. "So are you, baby." Back home, Thorne waited on the porch. He stood when they arrived, unsure whether to hug or step aside. Iris offered a polite nod. Nothing more. He noticed the sun in her hair, the calm in her steps, the absence of need in her eyes. And he knew she was drifting beyond his reach, and she wasn't looking back. There was a stillness to the early morning hours, an almost sacred silence before the world began its daily storm. For Iris, this hour became her cathedral. Before Alara woke, before emails flooded in, before Thorne's shadow crept across the threshold of her routine, she sat at the kitchen table with a hot cup of black coffee and a legal pad. And she wrote. Not about heartbreak anymore. Not even about healing. Now she wrote about ambition. The shift had begun quietly. A whisper in the back of her mind. You could do more. You were meant for more. What began as edits on other people's manuscripts turned into her pitching ideas, leading client meetings, mentoring new hires. Lena noticed. Everyone did. One afternoon, Lena pulled her aside with a wry smile. You're too damn smart to be in this position much longer. I'm just getting started, Iris said. Exactly. Alara was thriving too. With Iris lighter, freer, more present, the little girl's laughter rang through their modest home with renewed joy. They had their rituals, Friday pancakes with smiley faces, Sunday library visits, Wednesday spa night, where they'd paint toenails and wear clay masks and giggle at how silly they looked. But Iris never forgot the storm she'd come through. The lessons carved deep into her. One of them, never wait for someone else to save you. She enrolled in night courses, business strategy, leadership, digital branding. She wanted to understand the structure of success, not just touch its edges. Most nights, she studied until midnight. Some part of her feared falling behind again. But most of her? She was simply on fire. Thorne noticed. It began subtly, the questions, the offered help. Need anything at the store? Want me to watch Alara on Friday so you can rest? Iris appreciated the gestures, but she no longer leaned on them.
She didn't need to.
And maybe that's what scared him. You're different lately, he said one evening while she filled out course assignments at the dining table. I hope so, she replied without looking up. No, I mean you're stronger. But colder too. I'm focused, she said simply. He nodded, stung. Do you ever miss us? Iris paused. Then she looked him in the eyes. I miss the version of us that existed before the lies. Before the betrayal. But that version is gone. One afternoon, Lena invited Iris to a Women in Leadership networking event. It was high-profile.
Polished.
A room filled with entrepreneurs, authors, and CEOs. Iris stood in heels she hadn't worn since her wedding rehearsal, a structured navy blazer, and a gold watch Alara had gifted her with glitter stickers that still clung to the strap. She felt powerful. At the event, she met Carmen Rosales, a best-selling memoirist and startup investor with a presence that quieted rooms. I've heard about you, Carmen said, sipping wine. Lena says you're the storm in her calm seas. Iris chuckled. I prefer the eye of the storm. Carmen leaned in. Ever thought about building something of your own? The idea had flickered in Iris's mind. A consultancy for female writers. Perhaps. A hybrid agency meets publishing platform. But she'd shelved it under someday. Now, someday seemed like a weak excuse. In May, Iris registered her business, Glasshouse Collective. The name came from a journal entry she'd written in her darkest days. They threw stones at the glass house I built with love. But I turned the shards into a mosaic no one could shatter again. She used her savings to build a website. networked like a professional, cold emailed clients, set up branding consultations, published a manifesto that went semi-viral among young women on LinkedIn. In just 3 months, she signed 7 clients. Lena beamed with pride. "I hate to lose you," she said when Iris gave notice, "but you were never meant to stay."
Meanwhile,
Thorne's life unraveled quietly. His real estate firm lost 2 major clients. Rumors swirled about financial missteps. Rhea had taken their son and moved to another state. The house he once used to host networking parties now echoed with absence. One evening, he showed up at Iris's door with sunken eyes. "I messed everything up," he said. She didn't offer sympathy, just opened the door for Alara to greet him. Their child still needed her father. But Iris? She no longer needed a man who only valued her in retrospect. In the fall, Iris was invited to speak on a podcast hosted by an acclaimed literary coach. Topic: Reclaiming Your Narrative. She was nervous, vulnerable, but honest. "I stayed silent for a long time. Not because I was weak, but because I was trying to survive. Now I speak, not for revenge, but so others know silence isn't the only option." Messages flooded in afterward. Women, single parents, survivors, dreamers. "You said everything I was afraid to say. Your story gave me the courage to leave. Thank you for showing us how to rise." Iris cried reading them, not out of sadness, but out of purpose. Alara's school had a career day. Each parent was invited to speak. Thorne, once the proud closer of real estate deals, had declined. But Iris stood tall in front of 25 wide-eyed 7-year-olds and told them about stories, about building dreams from words. "Even when life gets messy, even when people hurt you," she said, "you can write a new chapter. You always can." Alara beamed with pride. Margot grew quieter. Once the queen of unsolicited opinions, she now watched Iris with unfamiliar eyes. On Thanksgiving, she pulled Iris aside. "I misjudged you." Iris blinked. "I thought you were soft, passive, but you're steel." Iris smiled gently. "I was both, and that's okay." Late one night, Iris sat alone on her porch. Her business was growing. Her child was thriving. Her name was beginning to mean something in circles that once ignored her. She looked up at the stars. They had always been there, quiet, constant, distant. Just like her strength. Now it was close.
Real.
Unmistakable. She whispered to the wind, "I'm rising." And the wind whispered back, "About damn time." It began with a voicemail. Thorne's voice, once full of confidence, charm, and steel, now cracked like thin ice. "Iris, if you have a moment, there's something I need to talk to you about."
"Please."
Iris didn't respond. She listened.
Twice.
Then deleted the message. She had learned. Not every door deserved to be reopened. But the universe had its own plans. That weekend, Margot collapsed in her backyard while watering the withering roses Thorne never helped her tend. It was a minor stroke. She survived, but the diagnosis was clear: vascular dementia, progressing faster than expected. When Iris arrived at the hospital, Thorne was already there. His head hung low, the once pristine collar of his shirt now slightly wrinkled. She hadn't seen him this undone in years. "She was asking for you," he said. Iris didn't nod.
Didn't speak.
She simply walked into the room. Margot lay in the bed, small and quiet, fragile in a way Iris had never imagined. For a moment, she looked like another woman entirely. Not the sharp-tongued mother-in-law who had once called her too emotional, but someone lost and scared. "Hello, Margot," Iris said gently. The old woman's eyes fluttered open. "Iris," she whispered, voice barely audible. "The girl who stayed." Iris stayed longer than expected that day. She brought Alara the next afternoon. The child clutched a bouquet of wildflowers and sang a song she'd learned at school. For the first time, Iris saw Margot's eyes fill with tears. Real ones. Afterward, Thorne walked them to the parking lot. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter now. "Humble. Uncertain, Iris didn't say you're welcome. Instead, she looked at him fully, for the first time in months. What's happening with you? She asked. And he told her. The truth was, Thorne had lost nearly everything. His firm had folded after a quiet but brutal embezzlement scandal. He wasn't charged, but he wasn't spared either. His name, once a calling card in the industry, had become a cautionary tale. Rhea had taken their son and filed for sole custody. The apartment he rented now had water damage and a view of an alley filled with broken beer bottles and sagging cardboard. I'm not asking for anything, he said. I don't know who I am anymore. Iris stared at him for a long time. You're who you've always been, she said. It's just clear now. Despite everything, she continued visiting Margot. Twice a week, then more as the symptoms worsened. She brought homemade soup, played old jazz records, and sat through rambling stories that faded halfway through. Once, Margot mistook her for her younger self. You mustn't let people tame your fire, dear, she said. Iris nearly laughed through her tears. People in town began talking. About the woman who forgave. About the man who fell. About the mother-in-law clinging to fragments of memory. But Iris had stopped caring about whispers. She lived in clarity now. One rainy evening, Margot clutched Iris's hand. I see now, she said. You weren't the weak one. Iris squeezed back. None of us really were. We just made different choices. Thorne tried, in small ways, to make amends. He attended Alara's school events without being asked. He helped clean Margot's house. Once, Iris caught him scrubbing baseboards in silence, something she never imagined him doing before. But the air between them never softened. He asked one night, eyes steady, do you think we'll ever find our way back? Iris looked out at the moonlight spilling over the porch. No, she said. But I hope you find your way forward. Meanwhile, Iris's business flourished. Glass House Collective signed a contract with a mid-sized publishing house in Chicago. She hired her first assistant. Interviews began rolling in. Her podcast appearances multiplied. She even gave a TED-style talk at a regional women's leadership summit titled, Strength in Silence, Power in the Rebuild. She didn't mention names. She never needed to. But every word carried weight, because it was true. Then came a letter. An actual, handwritten letter. From Rhea. It was only 3 paragraphs long. I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness. But I need to thank you. I watched you endure what I couldn't. I broke free by breaking someone else, and I regret that. My son deserves better than what we've both given him. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Iris folded the letter and placed it in a box labeled Unfinished Chapters. She didn't reply. Some bridges are best left halfway built. In January, Margot passed in her sleep. It was quiet, peaceful. Alara had drawn her a birthday card the night before, which lay unopened on her bedside table. At the funeral, Iris delivered a short eulogy. She didn't pretend Margot had been a saint, but she spoke of growth, of mistakes, of forgiveness that doesn't always look like reconciliation. She wasn't easy, Iris said, but neither was I. And sometimes, learning how to love someone starts with letting go of who you thought they should be. Thorne cried openly. His shoulders shook under the weight of his guilt, his loss, his unspoken apologies. After the service, he approached Iris outside the church. I don't deserve this, he said. No, she agreed. But grace isn't about deserving. Spring returned. The trees outside Iris's home bloomed pink and bright, Alara's favorite season. They planted herbs in the window box and spent afternoons making fresh lemonade, pretending they were chefs in a Parisian cafe. Alara had started writing little stories in her journal about brave queens and single mothers with magical swords who saved entire villages without help. Iris smiled when she found one titled The Woman Who Could Not Be Broken. She didn't edit a word. One evening, Alara asked, Mom, do you think Daddy is sad? Yes, Iris answered. Do you think he's still good? I think he's learning how to be, she said. Alara nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I want him to try. Children understood what adults struggled with, that healing isn't always about perfection, it's about effort. The week after Margot's death, Iris found an old photo in a box of forgotten keepsakes. It was from her wedding day. Her eyes in the photo were soft, hopeful, still blind to the storm ahead. She studied the woman in the picture for a long time, not with bitterness, but with quiet compassion. "You didn't know yet," she whispered, "but you would rise." Then she tore the photo in half, not out of rage, but out of closure. Thorne left town not long after. He had taken a job in another state, far from the shadows of his past. He asked to say goodbye. They met at the park, where Alara played on the swings. "I'm going to try again," he said. "Somewhere new." She nodded. "Good. I'll write to Alara. I want her to know I'm not disappearing." "She'll like that." He hesitated. Then, "And if I ever become someone worthy of your time." She smiled, but there was no invitation in it. "You were never mine to save, Thorne. Only yourself." That night, Iris lit a candle, not for mourning, but for transition.
For all that had been lost. For all that had been found.
For Margot, for Rhea, for the woman she once was. Then she blew it out. And in the darkness, she felt no fear. Only freedom. The first time Iris saw her name on a billboard, she didn't cry. She stood in front of the glowing screen in downtown Chicago, staring at the bold white letters. Iris Caldwell, author, entrepreneur, survivor. Beneath that, keynote speaker, Women of Impact Conference. The wind whipped her coat open. Cameras flashed nearby. Strangers passed by, oblivious. She stood still, soaking in the moment. It wasn't pride that swelled inside her. It was clarity, a sense of return. But not to who she was before, to someone deeper, unshakable. In just 3 years, Iris had built a brand from grit. Her first book, What the Ashes Left, became a quiet bestseller. It wasn't a revenge memoir. It was something else, a roadmap for women rebuilding from emotional ruin. It was honest, relentless, not pretty, but healing. She followed it with a podcast, She Didn't Break, which quickly amassed a loyal audience. Women wrote to her from prisons, shelters, boardrooms, churches. They spoke of their own betrayals, their own freedom. Iris didn't offer them perfect answers. Just proof that survival was possible, and success didn't need to scream to be real. Her daughter, Alara, now 10, thrived in her own right. Bright-eyed and fearless, she joined Iris on book tours, carried her own little notebook everywhere, and occasionally whispered, "One day, I'll write my story too." At night, Iris still tucked her in, still whispered, "You are whole. You are worthy." Because she believed it. For her daughter, and finally for herself. One afternoon, Iris received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but instinct told her otherwise. "Iris," a familiar voice said. It was Rhea. I didn't know who else to call," she said, her voice shaking.
"Thorne," he left.
Just packed up and walked out. Said he needed to be alone. "My son keeps asking where he went." Iris didn't respond immediately. "I'm not asking you to fix it," Rhea added. "I just thought you should know. He's disappearing for more than just me now." Iris thanked her and hung up. Later that night, she searched Thorne's name on LinkedIn. No updates. No new jobs. Just silence. She let out a breath and closed the browser. Some chapters end without punctuation. The next major moment came unexpectedly. She was invited to the governor's leadership panel on women's equity. Her name listed beside CEOs, founders, and cultural icons. Backstage, as a makeup artist dusted her cheeks, Iris caught her reflection in the mirror. Her jawline was sharper, her eyes calmer, her smile deliberate. She didn't miss the woman she had been. But she honored her. Back at home, Alara handed her a crumpled permission slip. "School wants parents to come in for career day," she said. "You don't have to if you're busy." Iris smiled. "You want me there?" Alara shrugged, trying to play it cool. But her eyes betrayed the truth. "Okay," Iris said. "I'll be there." At career day, other parents talked about mergers, contracts, and medical breakthroughs. When Iris stood up, the room hushed. I help people rebuild after everything falls apart, she said. A boy in the back raised his hand. Like houses. Sometimes, Iris laughed. But more often, hearts. And lives. At the end of the day, a young teacher approached Iris in private. I read your book last year, she whispered. It saved me. Just thank you. Iris nodded, touched. You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible. The accolades kept coming. An interview with Time. A feature on NPR. A segment on Good Morning America. She remained humble but firm, never allowing anyone to reduce her story to a headline. In every interview, she said the same thing. My strength didn't come from surviving. It came from choosing not to stay broken. Then, one cold morning in February, Iris received a handwritten envelope in the mail. It was from Margot's estate attorney. Inside, a simple note. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. I know now that loving you should have been easy. I made it hard. You deserved better. I hope this helps, even a little. Attached was a deed. Margot had left Iris her old house. Iris stared at the document for a long time. Not because she wanted the property, but because it proved something real. Even the hardest hearts can soften in the end. She visited the house that weekend. The roses had grown wild. The shutters creaked. The walls still smelled faintly of chamomile and ash. Elara walked beside her, curious. Are we moving here? No, Iris said. But we're going to restore it.
Why?
Because healing isn't just for people. It's for places too. They turned it into a women's community center. The Ember House, a space for healing, for rebuilding, for connection. Each room was painted in warm tones. Quotes from Iris's books adorned the walls. There were workshops, quiet corners, tea circles, and even a garden where survivors could plant something and watch it grow. It became a haven. And with it, Iris became something more than a name on a page. She became a movement. One evening, after a long workshop, Iris sat on the porch of the Ember House, sipping chamomile tea. A car pulled up. A tall, familiar figure stepped out.
Thorn.
Older now. Leaner. Eyes heavy, but softer. I heard what you did with the house, he said. Iris gestured to the seat beside her. He sat. They said nothing for a while. Then he asked, How do you do it? How do you stay so calm? I stopped chasing closure, she replied. It doesn't exist. Only peace does. He nodded. I think I'm finally ready to learn that. Before he left, Thorn handed her a small envelope. Inside, a letter to Elara. Iris read it that night. It was raw, honest. Not perfect, but real. She showed it to Elara, who sat in silence, absorbing every word. Finally, Elara said, Can I write back? Of course, Iris said. Because healing, when shared, becomes legacy. The years rolled forward gently. Iris watched Elara grow into a teenager with fire in her eyes and wisdom beyond her years. She watched the Ember House expand. She mentored women, published 2 more books, and turned down a reality show offer because some things didn't need a camera. Then one spring, she was honored with the Phoenix Award for Human Resilience. A national ceremony.
Lights.
Applause. A standing ovation. On stage, Iris stood still. Then she said simply, I don't want to be remembered for what I survived. I want to be remembered for who I became afterward. The audience erupted. After the ceremony, she slipped out early, back to her hotel room. Elara was waiting, sprawled on the bed, laptop open. Guess what? Elara grinned. I submitted my first short story to a magazine. Iris beamed. What's it called? Elara turned the screen toward her. The Daughter of the Woman Who Rose. They both laughed, then cried a little. Not from sadness, but from arrival. Because this was the shift. Not revenge. Not triumph over anyone.
But peace.
Purpose. And a power that asked for nothing, but gave everything. The morning sun filtered through the sheer white curtains of Iris's countryside home. Warm, gentle, quiet. Not the triumphant kind of morning that bursts through windows, demanding attention.
But the soft kind.
The kind that whispers, "You're safe. You're home." Iris stood barefoot on the wooden porch, a mug of mint tea warming her palms.
Her hair was loose now,
Streaked with silver that shimmered under the early light. She no longer dyed it, no longer tried to erase the passage of time. She wore it like a medal. Alara's laughter echoed from the garden. She was 16 now. Confident, inquisitive, stubborn in all the right ways. She had Iris's fire, but none of her mother's early wounds. That was Iris's greatest victory. No one knew exactly why Iris had stepped away. She hadn't retired, exactly. She just stopped. After the 3rd book and the 10th country she toured, she quietly declined new interviews. She closed her speaking calendar. She archived the podcast. She let others pick up the torch. And people did. The world had changed. Women were rising. Stories like Iris's were no longer rare. They were becoming movements. She didn't feel left behind. She felt complete. The Ember House was now run by a new generation of leaders, women Iris had once mentored. They kept her photo in the front hall, but rarely called unless it was something they truly couldn't solve. And she loved that. Sometimes she visited unannounced. Sometimes she didn't visit at all. She trusted it would live without her. That, she realized, was freedom too. One afternoon, Iris sat with Alara on a faded picnic blanket under their plum tree. The fruits were ripening early that year, a small blessing in an otherwise quiet season. "Are you ever going to fall in love again?" Alara asked suddenly. Iris chuckled, caught off guard. That's a sharp turn from talking about college majors. "Yeah, well," Alara picked at the grass. "I just wonder. You never really talk about it." Iris took a long breath, the kind you take when you've already made peace with the answer. "I don't think I need to," she said. "I have love. All around me.
in you.
In the work I've done. In the life I've built. I've never felt unloved. But not romantic love. I had that once. Maybe not the kind that lasts. But it taught me something. And that was enough." Alara nodded, thoughtful. Then said, "Okay. But if you do fall in love again, please tell me first before anyone else finds out on the internet." Iris laughed, a rich, full sound.
"Deal."
That night, Iris wrote a letter. She didn't intend to send it. It was more of a ritual. "Dear me, you made it.
Not to the top, not to fame, but to peace.
You learned to love yourself without needing permission. You stopped defining yourself by what was lost. You embraced the ordinary joys, morning tea, daughter's laughter, soft evenings. You gave without resentment. You forgave without permission. And when the world expected you to crumble, you wrote your own ending. You didn't escape the fire. You walked through it. And you came out not as smoke, but as sky. With love. Iris." She tucked the letter in a drawer beside dozens of others. She had been writing one each year since she turned 40. Not to mark time. To bless it. Months later, Iris was invited to a wedding. Not just any wedding, Ria's. Yes, Ria. The other woman. The former villain. But time does funny things to pain. And healing doesn't always look like forgetting. Sometimes it looks like sitting in the front row, wearing a powder blue dress, smiling as a woman you once thought ruined your life starts over herself. Ria walked down the aisle, radiant. Not perfect. Not trying to be. Just human. At the reception, she hugged Iris tightly and whispered, "I would never have found the courage to change if you hadn't first." Iris simply smiled. "We're all just rewriting ourselves." Later, Thorne approached. He had aged, of course. But it was the softness in his face that stood out. The apology that no longer needed words. They danced once. No one stared. When the song ended, he said, "Thank you for not staying angry forever." "I didn't do it for you," she replied. "But you're welcome." After the wedding, Iris and Alara drove home in silence for a while. Then Alara asked, "Did it hurt?" "What?" "Seeing him. Her. All of that." Iris considered it. "No," she said, "because I'm no longer holding the pain." Autumn arrived gently that year. The trees wore their fire without shame. Alara prepared for her first solo trip, a writer's retreat in Vermont. She packed and repacked, nervous but thrilled. On the morning she left, Iris hugged her long and tight. "Write whatever feels true," she said. "Even if it scares you." "I will," Alara promised. "You'll be okay while I'm gone?" "I'll be free," Iris smiled. The house was quieter without Alara, but not lonely. Iris spent her mornings walking the trails near the creek, collecting leaves and pressing them into old journals. She spent afternoons reading novels she never had time for. She painted sometimes, badly but joyfully. Freedom wasn't loud. It was light. One evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Thunder cracked. Rain poured. The power flickered and went out. Iris lit candles, made herself soup on the gas stove, and curled up by the fireplace. And in the quiet roar of the storm, she felt something stir. Gratitude. Not for the storm, or even the fire, but for the woman she had become in its aftermath. She picked up a pen and began to write. Not a book, not a speech, just a story. A simple one. About a girl who loved too early, broke too deeply, healed too slowly, and bloomed anyway. It didn't need to be published. It just needed to be told. Weeks passed. The leaves fell. The air sharpened. And one morning, as Iris watched the frost settle on the grass, she whispered aloud, "I'm happy." No one heard it. But that wasn't the point. The point was she finally believed it. Months later, Alara returned, taller, wiser, notebooks stuffed with drafts. She had made friends, learned poems by heart, and even kissed someone under a maple tree. Iris didn't ask too many questions. She just listened. That night, as they watched stars from the porch, Alara said, "You know, Mom, your story changed so many lives." Iris turned to her. "And yours changed mine." They sat there for hours, no need to speak. The wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of wood smoke and memory. Years would pass. Alara would publish. Iris would age. The world would forget headlines, names, achievements. But somewhere, a girl would read a story in a library and feel less alone. A woman would walk out of a loveless marriage with quiet resolve. A mother would plant her first seed after the storm. And none of them would know Iris's name, but they would know the path she carved. In the final chapter of her journal, Iris wrote only this: "Freedom is not revenge. It's not triumph. It's waking up and knowing you owe nothing to anyone, not even the past." And that was enough. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.